we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and support the recognition of traditional Aboriginal law across the nation. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging on this land. Hello, I am Jenna Chanel Hayes and this is The Loving Podcast. As most of you know, Indigenous Australian culture is the oldest living culture on Earth. And with that comes a deep wisdom and understanding of our natural world. Given the increasing depletion of our natural resources and the growing rates of pollution across the globe, I believe it's time to listen to our First Nations people in order to understand our natural world on a deeper level and begin implementing sustainable processes that will reduce our carbon footprint and allow our natural world the space for rejuvenation. Today's guest is someone who is fighting for the future of our children, of our children's children, and so on. He's a Muruwari and Budjiti artist, a teacher, and a powerful water activist. Uncle Bruce Shillingsworth, welcome to our podcast.
Yama, we say Yama. Yama meaning welcome.
Yama. So grateful that you could be here today. I am so inspired by your work. And I hope that we can get your voice to more and more people, both across Australia and internationally, because it's voices like yours that need to lead us into the future. So I guess, can you tell us the roots of your activism?
Look, I think I was born into it. I mean, being around great leaders at the time, I born, the early 70s and stuff like that, and we had a lot of great activists out there fighting for land rights in Australia. And one of my auntie, which is named Essie Coffey, the great bush queen, they call her, Essie Coffey, she's a great female leader in our area. They helped establish, land council, they had to establish the medical centre, all those, Aboriginal organisations we've got today, so they fought for all that stuff. And I think being around great people like Auntie Essie, Uncle Tombo Winters, Stephen Gordon, and, you had Gary Foley, all those other people that were going on around the country. I was born in 1967, which is a great referendum. And the Aboriginal people had the right to vote and were counted. So I think that's where it all started. A great year, 67. There's a lot of great years, 1992 when we had the Mabo decision. So a lot of great things happened. And I think just being around that environment, where people that fought and stood up for who they were and fight for changes, not just in our lives but in society.
Mm-hmm. And Uncle Bruce, where is your family from?
My mother's nation is Budjiti. My mother come off the Paru River, which runs into the Darling. The Darling, we call it the Bourke now. And my father comes off the Culgo, which is a Muruwari country.
Okay.
And I live in a little place called Brewarrina. Brewarrina is on where the Darling River starts. The Barwon runs into the Darling. With the great ancient fish traps there at Brewarrina. So it's a wonderful place. It's a beautiful little place.
Do you live in Sydney now?
I live in Waterloo, Sydney.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, when did you leave?
I left Barwon about 15 years ago. I moved down to Sydney. I wanted to bring the kids down to give them that better opportunity, get through the school, university and do jobs and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I think it was a great move for us. And then all this work started to happen with the arts and the protest and all, doing that sort of stuff.
For far too long, First Nations voices around the world have not been recognised. Do you feel that is changing now in Australia?
Look, I believe that we're in a revolution. There's a revolution that's already started, and it's going globally. First Nation people, not just here in Australia, but all around the world. I mean, they had the knowledge. They lived with Mother Earth. They had the answer. I mean, for so long it'd been ignored, like you said, been ignored and weren't listened to. I mean, now we look at climate change. Now the devastation of our rivers and the land. Our old people have been saying that for a long time. So I think what I've done now is taken the baton and we've got to run with it. And I think we're all got to contribute. And I think First Nation people all over the world have been saying it. And the First Nation people are feeling the brunt of what's happening right across the world, with the climate change and everything else. The disappearing of our rivers, the rising sea levels, food source, all that. So we feel it. And now I think Mother Earth is screaming out, Mother Earth is speaking. And I think it's speaking through First Nation.
Because First Nations people are the ones that are connected.
Well, we have the greater connection through our totem system and through our beliefs and through our stories, through our songlines. I mean, we go back 1,000 years since the beginning of time. So that's our great connection.
Can you explain to people who may not know what songlines and totems and all of these beautiful Indigenous cultural
Well, if you look right across this big continent of ours, there were over 500 plus nations. They spoke over 250 different languages. So we were like multicultural, but we were all lived in this environment together. Through our system, the totems were passed down through generations, just like we have now our surnames that be passed down. But we had totems that were passed down through our generation, maybe through our mother's line or through our father's line. If my totem was the kangaroo, my responsibility was to protect and take care of that kangaroo. So we weren't allowed to kill it or eat it. So that's only my totem. But all across Australia, they had individual totems or nation totems or group totems that sustained and looked after all living creature. So we had a responsibility looking after every animal, bird, reptile, lizard, whatever you call it. And that's to stop it from becoming extinct. Now, if you look around here, not just here in Australia, but right across the world, a lot of our animals are coming extinct. Why? Because there's no one there to protect them. Our totem system being destroyed, right? Well, we still get our song line, we still got our totems that we're practicing in parts of Australia. But that's now starting to disappear. We need to get back to that to be able to look after our living creatures on this planet.
And can you tell us how that is directly linked to what we're seeing in the river systems?
Well, let's talk about the Bourke. Let's talk about the Murray-Darling. All right, there's over 40, 50 different nations lived along the Murray-Darling. Now, the Murray-Darling runs through 4 different states. It comes from Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. We see the drying up of our rivers, but I believe parts of it being the droughts, but I believe that it was man-made, most of it man-made. The big agriculture, with their big dams and the big pumps are now pumping the water out. I believe that the water was there to share. Our First Nation people relied on that water for thousands and thousands of years, not just the people, but the animals or plant that survived from it. So when that disappears, our community disappears and we all disappears, and our population then starts to migrate to other towns and cities. What I've seen over the last 10 years with the drying up of our rivers, I've seen a lot of people committing suicide, diabetes, a lot of other health problems in those communities when the river's gone. We've got the pollution in our waters, the chemicals that the cotton and all the other farmers that are putting in our rivers that are going through our bloodstream, they're going into our bodies, and now they're affecting our bodies. And that's why a lot of our First Nation people are dying young. They're ending up on dialysis machine, so it's affecting their kidneys. Last year we had to get truckloads of water out of those fresh water out of those communities because the water were unsafe to drink. It still is, unsafe to drink. It's got to be fixed. So what we need to do is start looking at fixing those sorts of things. Once we get an healthy land, healthy river, we'll have healthy people.
The life expectancy out in these country towns, in these communities, is around 45 for Indigenous people. That is clearly a message that there is something wrong.
Well, like I said, our old people have been saying that for a long time. But it's not only life expectancy. If you look around, a lot of things that contribute to that. Yeah. If you look at the incarceration rates of our, not just men, women too as well, that have been incarcerated. People are dying young, high rates of suicide. More and more of our people are getting on dialysis machine, kidney diseases, all those sorts of things. And that's to contribute to a short life for our First Nation people. But how do we fix that? We've got to fix our environment. We've got to have a healthy environment. We've got to have a healthy diet. Things around us. You've got to have exercise. And I believe we've got to go back to our traditional way of doing things. It's the only way that we're going to move forward, I think, for First Nation people.
I think most people around Australia have seen those photos of all of the fish dying.
Well, if you look at the Murray cod, the 50-year-old cods, how do you bring them back? You look at the long-necked turtle, the freshwater mussels. They disappear and they come extinct. And you got the animals, the emus and kangaroos that come to drinks out of those water bottles, so they disappear too. And then if the food source disappear, then the Aboriginal people can't, they haven't got their food sources. They rely on the river for the fish and, the water creatures and that to survive. The medicinal use as well, the plants that grows along the river disappeared. You look at a lot of the clearing of the land now. You look on the western side of the Great Divide, the clearing of the land. It stopped the rain from coming to our country. It stopped the natural water cycle. So we need to start, planting, put those trees back in the ground, put nature back the way it was.
And why are they clearing the land? What are they?
Well, it's clearing for farming and big agriculture.
Is it cows?
Well, it's the grazing, the cows, the cattle, the sheep, all that. They clean the land as well. They just eat all the plants, especially all the native plants. They disappear. All our food that the First Nation people use, so slowly disappear. So we've got to be very careful, if it's about our survival. We need to start putting nature back the way it was and start looking after our Mother Earth.
A really big issue is access to fresh food as well. How do we make sure fresh fruit, fresh vegetables are available in these communities at a reasonable price and, not 3 times what they should be?
Well, what do we think we're doing? I think we're growing food and we're sending it overseas, or we're now, bringing food into us. Why can't we set up our farms along the rivers, get people, employed to do them, get farm vegetables, or get those little communities to grow their own farm, grow their own vegetables. That's something we can do, and that's something we're working on. If we want our natural plants and natural food, we need to start planting them. Getting it back to how it was. And that a lot of the food that's been shipped into those communities, you got to buy at an high price.
Yeah.
And our community, the people in those communities cannot afford it.
No.
You talk about a loaf of bread, it's $5. Here in the city, it's about $1 or $2. It's old by the time it gets out there, so it's out of date.
Yep.
So that's what we need to do. Outside people from bigger cities, bigger communities, start supporting those local communities out in the rural areas and in our outback. It has to happen.
And what natural food would you grow in these communities?
Well, I believe that our First Nation people need to get back to their natural diet.
Like bush tomatoes, yams?
Yeah, bush tomatoes, you got fruits, nuts, berries.
Are there still kangaroos and emus and other animals that are, living in these areas close by the river?
Look, there are lots of animals out there. But then you got the farmers with the fence that, they stop the animal from, migrating across the land. And so it stopped a lot of the First Nation people getting to access to hunting those animals as well and getting their bush tucker. So I think there needs to be a more communication or relationship between, the farmers on the land and First Nation people.
And bringing, I guess, finance, but also the business skills out into those communities.
Well, I'll go into our communities and train our kids up, give them the skills and the training to be able to do it. They run their own businesses. You can get grocery stores, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Transporting it. Driving those trucks or whatever it is it takes to get it out there.
Yeah.
It's a bit, we need to empower our community to be able to do that. I believe we need our own First Nation people working with First Nation people. We want our people to be able to be employed, go home and fill those, positions in those communities. You look at Brewarrina, we got 90% of the population is First Nation. Why aren't we controlling the council? Why haven't we got an Aboriginal mayor? Those are the changes that we've got to make. But it'll happen.
Yes. Pre-colonisation, there were no fences, there was no, division of the lands and properties. Can you tell us about that?
I can only talk about my mum experience. Mum's in her 90 now. She lives out at Enngonia in a little place called Enngonia on the Warrego River. She's very healthy, she's strong. She's still got a lot of her memories. We believe that because she walked the land.
Yeah.
She walked over 400 kilometres to meet my dad, to marry Dad. So she knew where to stop, she knew the lakes, she knew how to catch food, she knew to find water. So all that stuff was on her, on her travels and on her country and Dad's country. She knew where to find food, she had easy access to food. But now a lot of our people hasn't got that access to their land and to be able to walk their land and to be able to practice their culture and to practice the thing that they've done in the past. There's a lot of restriction, like I said, farmers now controlling the land, there's fences, there's roads, there's all that sorts of stuff. Climate change now too as well has a big effect. The devastation and destruction of the land and the rivers makes it even worse. But I think we can get back to doing a lot of that stuff. And I believe that a lot of our nations right across Australia are now getting back and doing their traditional practices and they're living off their land and want to go back to their land and country to be able to connect back to that, to the dreaming and stuff.
Can you tell us about the dreaming?
Well, the dreaming is very important. And we believe that we were created by the Great Spirit. He gave us our laws and our land and where we lived. We had, learned about respect and culture and the practices we have. And like I said, the law was very important. We can talk about LAW, but you've got to talk about LORE too as well, Aboriginal law, which is very important. That connects us to everything around us. Our stories relates to that. Each nation and where they are, got their own stories and got their own songlines. Yeah. But if you look at our songline, especially with the rainmakers, Muruwari, they had a songline that goes right up through Central Australia and right up to the north. So there was a great connection there, songline. So if I can go from New South Wales, I can go up the Northern Territory to my relatives or kins up there and they same dreaming. And that's how it was. All the 500 different nations were connected through our songs, through our dance and through our music. And that's what, it was for the survival of us here on this, on Australian continent.
Yeah.
And we lived for thousands of years, like I said. We could have went on for another 1,000 years. But look what's happening over the last 250 years.
Yeah.
That's what we all need to look at.
Yeah.
Our rivers, the water now is owned by overseas company. Where's First Nations rights?
Yeah.
Where's our rights to the rivers? We've been there living there since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
So we should be a decision-making in what happens to our rivers and our waters and our land. It's not there to be auctioned, and it's not there to be owned. Water is there to be shared, not just for us as humans, but for our living creatures. Think about the environment where we live. Take out water, you take away life, then become death. Everything dies and come extinct.
Which is what we're starting to see.
That's what we're starting to see. That's what we're starting to see. And they're starting to put the, auctioning the water now on Wall Street. It's starting to... So bizarre what they're doing. But we've got to stop it. The big corporates. The government is supporting their interests, not our interests, not First Nations' interest. That's why we fight.
Yeah.
And I'll never give up the fight.
How do we do that?
Well, we've got to start getting out there and empowering our people. We need proper leaders in there, leaders in Parliament. They need to start listening to First Nation voices. They need to get out there, build a better relationship and contacting with Aboriginal people.
Yeah.
Get out there on country, listen to their voices, listen to their concerns and their issues.
Yeah.
Do
you believe democracy is the way forward?
Well, democracy is good and bad in a way. But what is real democracy? Look at our country, look at the world. Look what it's created.
With the right leaders, then it's...
Well, we can put the right leaders in, but it has to come from us, from grassroots, people that lives in our communities. Like I said, the people that knows the communities. We know each other, we know what we need.
Yeah.
Like you said, we need the proper leaders in the right places, and I believe they're coming.
I think you might be one of them.
I just want to make a difference, get out there and my voice, and I think it's a way of contributing. I mean, we all have a different way of contributing. You through podcasting. And I think everyone has a different skill and different talent that we can contribute in a better world.
Yeah.
We are one.
Yeah.
You go back to the four-letter word again, LOVE. That's what's missing in the world today. We've got to show love. All men are equal.
Yeah.
No one should be left behind.
The Corroboree. Can you tell us about the Corroboree and how you plan on bringing Indigenous and non-Indigenous people together?
Well, Yamaga Bark at Corroboree last year. It was a successful event. What we wanted to do was bring non-Indigenous people out to the rivers to experience that, to sit on the river, sit on the land, to experience the drying up of our rivers and, the poisoning water and all that sort of stuff. But I wanted them to experience that and get that education and speak to elders who's suffering from the drying up of our rivers and the stuff that's going on around them. And what we wanted to do is then try to get outside help, like non-Indigenous people, to contribute to those communities. Walgett, Brewarrina, Bourke, Wilcannia and Walgett. Their towns are struggling, so we need outside support. But what we did last year is when we brought the 300,000 people into the community, they've actually spent money in those communities, so they help contributing to the businesses, keeping the businesses alive. And that's what we need to do. I mean, if they're struggling, we should be able to help them.
Yeah.
And I believe it's not just here, but all around the world. We've got to try to help each other.
Yeah. I have a question from before. You told me that your mum walked 400 Ks to your dad. Can you tell me how they met? I love love stories.
Traditionally, back in the old days, you weren't allowed to marry within your nation. You know why? Because you're mixed in blood.
Yeah.
Right, the blood weren't allowed to be mixed. So the old people used to make a decision, so you'd have to go to this nation to be able to marry. So Mum and the three sisters walked from the Paru across the Culgo, across the Warrego to the Culgo, which is 400 kilometres from my mum's nation to dad's nation. And she done that trip 4 times a year. Now, that's a distance from here to Canberra. Would you walk that distance if you were in love?
How did they meet? How did she know?
Wait a minute. Would you walk that distance if you were in love?
I have not. I've not walked that distance.
Well, that's the commitment, see? That's the commitment. That's true love.
Yeah.
Right. So when Mum married Dad, now they settled between the two nations.
Why did she have to walk? Why couldn't
Well,
he?
it was law back then that the women had to walk.
Right.
Right. That's in my nation. I don't know what other nations do, but that's what they had to do. The women had to walk.
Right.
But she knew where to find food. She knew where to stop up the lakes and catch crayfish and fish and duck eggs, and you had to survive.
Yeah. So how did they meet?
Well, the elders would have made that decision. Okay. They knew where you had to marry in certain nations.
Yeah.
So they had already made that arrangement. So the 3 sisters actually married 3 brothers.
So my grandparents, my granny and my granddad, both of their younger siblings married each other and both of their older siblings married each other. So, yeah, 3, 2.
There you go. Yeah, but that was law back then. If you look at a lot of the stuff that, a lot of the illness and sicknesses stuff now is because, we're mixing of the blood. Old people had control of the genetics, so their child would be born healthy. And it's not only that, it's connecting up the dreaming lines as well. The royal blood or the royal tongue line connect over here. And so that's your dreaming here, it's connect here, and then it connects over there. So it's travelled right across Australia then. And that's what connected all the 500 nations up. Even though we were separate.
Yeah.
And that connected us up.
And then Europeans came in and it was all broken.
Yeah, well, they come in, you had your frontier wars, the farmers wanted the land for farming. The Aboriginal people just wanted the land to survive, food and water. They got the people off the traditional lands and put them on missions and reserves, and that's where they stopped them from practicing their tradition, stopped them from speaking their language. So they formed the segregation and apartheid. And we talk about apartheid in South Africa, it happened here in Australia. Our people, First Nation people weren't allowed to go and swim in the public pool. They weren't allowed to go to the picture theatres. They weren't allowed to be seen on the streets. A lot of our people went to war to fight First World War and the Second World. And they weren't recognised. So they weren't citizens of this country, and yet they fought for this country. You look at from the 1800s to the 1900s, our people worked for 100 years. It hasn't been paid, never got a cent. So there's a lot of history and a lot of truth that need to be told here in this country, right across the world. And non-Indigenous people need to be educated about that.
Do you have conversations with government officials? Are those lines of communication opening up?
Look, there's small amounts of things happening with our leaders, the politicians, but I got no faith in our politicians. I believe that the changes are going to come from us, grassroots. Those politicians are there because of us. We vote them in, right? They should be there for the people, not for power. So I believe that we can make a difference if we put the right people in there. But I have no time of going discussing anything with politicians unless they really want to make a difference and make a change. Some are doing it, some are making a big difference. Look, last week we had some good news. They passed a bill that floodplain harvesting. So a lot of the pumps have been stop irrigating out of the rivers now. So what you got in certain parts of our rivers, it's got to stay natural. And I think changes are coming. Changes are coming.
We're all taught, and we have this upbringing, that my upbringing was completely white, completely isolated. I grew up on a sheep farm, beautiful family, very kind, good people, all of that. But I had no awareness about First Nations people or the history of this country. And I didn't learn about that. I went to Oklahoma when I was 16 and was thrown into racism and segregation, and I learned that, but I still had no idea what was happening in my own country. It's incredibly difficult to confront because it's not an easy fix. There is no easy solution. But the only way for us to progress and move forward is to acknowledge its presence and move through it together. We are all family.
Yeah. The past has got us to where we are today. But we are the now. We are the now, and we've got to change it for the future. The Constitution in Australia still discriminating against Aboriginal people. Those are the things we've got to change. So there's a lot of work to be done yet. But slowly people are realising. And that's the difference we want to make. There's 230 schools in my region that, Sydney East that I teach. So a lot of the stuff I teach, a lot of the knowledge, I pass on to not just Indigenous students, but non-Indigenous students. I believe in this country, non-Indigenous people are going to tell the true history of this country. They're the ones that are going to tell the story by us passing it down. Through our journey, traditionally, Our elders pass it down to the next generation. And that's what we want to do here. We've got to keep the dream alive, keep the journey going. We're on a journey. And I think we've got to give more. If we want to receive, we've got to give. You know, in our society, we didn't have the money. You know, we lived in a society for thousand years. So why do we need money?
Yeah.
We need it now to be able to survive. But I think we can all, you know, live in a life much better than what we are today.
We have to.
We have to, yeah. Need to sit down with First Nation people and work out planning and what's going to happen to our rivers. I think we've got to start looking at the effects on our health, First Nation health. Start putting in proper services, delivering of services to our communities to help support, you know, our community, which is going to help big time. Put the water back in the river, stop the big pumps, stop the irrigation, stop floodplain harvesting, stop the big dams, stop corporate from controlling our waters. I think give it back to community. Big floodplain harvesting to take out megalitres of water. That's what's got to stop.
Mining companies, how much water do they take?
A lot of water to be able to mine. Wentworth, a lot of big pipes that goes up to Broken Hill. They built a pipe system. That water is not for the community, it's for 3 mines.
Yeah.
Sucking the Menindee lakes dry. I believe that things will happen. Look, certain people come into place throughout history. You look at Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, you know, all those sorts of people that come. I believe that there's going to be another one come, and it's going to be from Australia.
Is that you?
No, it's not me. But I believe that they're going to carry a message similar because of the destruction, the things that's happening around us in the world today. Has to be a message. There's a new message, there's a new dreaming. We are a part of that dreaming now.
Yes, it's happening.
Yeah. And non-Indigenous people are now seeing its reality, but they need to really take a great look at themselves and how we do things and our practices. And I believe we live on one planet. We can't go nowhere else. So what we need to do, non-Indigenous people and Indigenous people need to start working together. Start working together to fix the problem that we have now. If we don't start now, you can say goodbye. Western society, their laws here in Australia, I can only talk about Australia, look what it's done over the last 250 years. You know, we've got to change the institutions, our education system. We need to flip it because we're heading down the wrong road. We've come to a turning point now in history. Come to a fork in the road, there's only 2 roads. You either go down the road of death and destruction, or you can go down the road of life and survival. I know what road I'm going to take, and that's reality. So I think we've got to start planning for the future, but do it now. Now is the time. We've got to stop raping our land, stop the fracking, stop the mining, stop poisoning our rivers, stop polluting our air. Stop cutting down those trees. Those trees gives us oxygen. We can't survive without the trees. So why do we need to clear the land? We cut down those trees, you might as well cut our throats. Look at the koalas, you know, after the bushfires, slowly disappearing. In another 20, 30 years, we mightn't see those koalas. So our kids will never see it. I want my children to grow up to be able to see those things. We're not just fighting for land, we're fighting for everything.
Yep.
You know, stop the destruction. We won't survive. We live in a great circle of life where everything relies on each other. Now it's time we've got to come together. We've got to pull it together. It's the survival of humans, us, on this one planet. But I believe we're in a special time in history. We got the tools to be able to do it. You know, we got the computer, we got technology, we can do everything we can now to change things.
Yeah.
But us as humans need to commit and sacrifice our life to make the change. We are riding the winds of change. We're riding the waves of change. That's what I see now. There's a revolution that's happening right across the world. Like I said, the spirit of this land, the great Southland, are now rising, touching the hearts of not just Indigenous people, but non-Indigenous people. And that spirit flows right across the great planet we live in. The great energy points are starting to connect. Stars are lining up. People are coming together. You would never know that we'd be here talking today. But what brought us together?
Yeah.
Something has brought us together to be able to tell our story and to be able to contribute to society. That's what's happening. So I feel great. I feel wonderful. Meeting nice people like yourself and people around the world that wants to make a difference now, wants to make a change.
Yeah.
It's our time to shine.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yes.
And nothing's going to stop us.
Can you direct anybody who is, I guess, now opening up their hearts and minds to the past and learning what happened? What can they do? Where can they go if they want to kind of contribute in creating a better way forward?
Well, what we need to do is I think we need to have more community coming together, more gatherings, all people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
And we need to sit down, talk about the truth, talk about how we can change things. I believe it has to come from grassroots. It's us, because we live in our community, we know our community, we know what our community wants. If everyone contributes, it'll make a better world. We've got to build a safe environment, a safe world for our kids to be able to grow up in the future. I want my grandchildren and their children to be able to live with your children, your grandchildren, and your children's children.
Yeah.
That's the important part. What do they want to see in the world? How do they want their environment? They want a clean, sustainable environment. They want clean drinking water. They want clean hair. They want natural food.
They want rivers to play in.
They want rivers, yes.
Uncle Bruce, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. You are an incredibly powerful voice in this country and I think for First Nations people around the world.
Thanks for having me and I hope you enjoyed it.
Everybody, I hope you have enjoyed Uncle Bruce, the absolute firecracker of a human who is saving our planet.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
To support Uncle Bruce in his fight to save our river systems, please head to thelovingpodcast.com and click on Uncle Bruce. I'd like to thank the beautiful Uncle Bruce Shillingsworth for sharing his voice with us today. If you'd like more information on joining this year's Corroboree, as well as on how to help fight poverty in Indigenous communities across our country, please see today's show notes. We look forward to catching you all again next week when we chat to the beautiful Teriro Movondo and discuss the sensitivities around the relationship between Black and white women.
That's what I love about my relationship with you, Jen, is it's about the nuances. It's about not going white woman, Black woman. It's okay, but what is the context that you're existing in? Are you willing as a spirit, as a human, as a being to evolve and learn, unlearn? Who are you as you?
Big love to you all.
The Loving Podcast is a One Love Films original podcast. It is recorded at Forbes Street Studios, Woolloomooloo by Charlotte Rochecouste and Nicholas Rowse. Our editors are Zoltan Fecso and Jenna Hayes. Our music is composed by Jenna Pratt and guitarist Joshua Gonzalez. Podcast photography and cover art is created by Sarah Fountain. Our behind-the-scenes photographers/videographers are Danielle Mazzucci, Barnaby Downs, Paul King and Ryan Andrew Lee. Our podcast imagery is created at Innkeeper Studios. I am your narrator, Victoria Jane Hind, and our producer is Jenna Hayes.